Hello there, Grumpy Old Fart here. A little bit of coffee there. I try to do informational videos that will help younger players and younger dungeon masters enjoy the game better. Dungeon masters to run a better game and players to enjoy the game better. One of the new ones I'm doing, the new video types, is AD&D hacks, because you have those life hacks on those videos on YouTube, and I figured there's some hacks in Dungeons and Dragons you can use to make your character a little better, have a little bit more fun. When you make up a character for AD&D, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition, which is what I play, your weapon choices are dictated or limited by the character class that you choose. For example, magic users, wizards, are limited to dagger, dart, and staff. Thieves are limited to club, dagger, dart, sling, or sword, and they're limited in the kind of swords they can take. Clerics are limited to club, flail, hammer, mace, and staff. I play, and I've talked about this in other videos with the clerics, I play where a cleric can also use the weapon of the god that they worship. For example, a cleric of Thor can use a hammer. A cleric of Ares should be able to use a spear or a sword. A cleric of Grumsh would use a spear. You see what I'm saying? Druids are limited to club, dagger, dart, hammer, scimitar, sling, spear, staff, etc. Now, understand scimitars. There's a wide variety of weapons listed under that, including sabers, tulwars, that kind of thing. Fighter types get the widest array of choices for weapon proficiencies, but most of the fighter subclasses have specific weapons that they have to be proficient with by a certain level, or they have certain weapons that they prefer, and you have to go by that. These considerations skew your choices when you have a fighter type. For example, a barbarian has to have hand axe, knife, and spear, but he gets 6 slots. Hand axe, knife, and spear, he gets 3 others. So there's still a lot of choice there. And spears are damn good weapons. I don't care who you are. For the most part, players look at the damage columns when they choose weapon proficiencies, and that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying it's not. However, this tends to make every player character be proficient in the same weapons, and it can get kind of boring. You know, if you always take the same weapon, it can get kind of boring. There are many factors to consider when choosing the weapons for your character. For example, if your character has a really high dexterity but low strength, you might want to consider taking bow as a primary weapon, because you're good with a bow and not with a sword. Just saying. If damage is the only consideration, the entire party will be armed with two-handed swords, heavy lances, and polearms. The things that you need to consider are size. Is your character large enough to use the weapon? Your background. Is the weapon appropriate for the background of your character? For example, a society without mining cannot have metal weapons, or they have to trade for them. They're going to be very rare. A society without horses cannot have lances. You know, things like that. Because a lance is a weapon specifically used from horseback. If they don't have any horses, they can't use spears. They can't use lances. They can use spears, just not lances. Functionality. Spears are excellent melee weapons with reach and damage, and can also be missile weapons. They're dual function. Darts give excellent ranged attacks and can be thrown 3 per round. You get 3 shots with darts. And you can also put drugs on them very easily. Mages and thieves do that a lot. I rarely take a magic user without dart as a proficiency, because it's a good ranged weapon. You don't have to close to melee to use a dagger or whatever. Everybody takes a staff because that's what they envision a wizard to have, and that's cool. But they're also able to use darts, which gives them a nice missile weapon from a distance. And usually wizards have a fairly high dexterity, so they're good with darts. So bows fire twice as fast as crossbows, but crossbows can double as melee weapons. If you smack somebody with a bow, it's negligible at best. Painful at most, but that's about it. Crossbows They're pretty heavy. They got a stock to them like a rifle. You can beat somebody with that. It's got some heft to it, you know. Caltrops can be used to effectively discourage pursuit and to limit the directions of attack. If you know somebody's going to attack you, and there's one of two ways they can come, if you put a bunch of caltrops on one side, that's going to limit their ability. If you don't know what a caltrop is, it looks like a little star-shaped thing, like a jack you play with as a kid. But they come in bundles, and you throw them on the ground. And no matter how they land, there's always a sharp point sticking up. The idea is to keep people from approaching from that direction. Or if you're running away, you throw them behind you, and the bad guys step on them, and they can't chase you because their feet hurt. Okay, they don't do a lot of damage, but they do discourage pursuit. Let me tell you, and you can drug those too. If you're going underground with potentially narrow confines, polearms and spears may not be your best choice. How much encumbrance can your character handle? How heavy weapons may not be practical. If it's a seaborne adventure, this will preclude your character using this will prevent, your character from using heavier weapons or horses or certain types of equipment. Slings can also double, if you decide to, slings can also double as garrots, choking cords kind of thing. A garrote, I think it's called. I've heard it pronounced garrote, whatever. Anyway, the point I'm making is you can use it to choke them. The point of this video is that sometimes there are more important considerations than just damage potential of a prospective weapon. Remember, your character is an individual. He or she has a background and specific tastes. Perhaps his training was exclusively as a desert horseback nomad, which would generally include some form of scimitar like a saber or a tulwar. Definitely a long sword at best. A two-handed sword he can't use because he's got to use the reins with one hand. But a long sword is meant to be used from horseback. That's why it's so long. A horseman's mace has a longer handle than a footman's mace. That's why it's a horseman's mace. Same thing with a hammer, a long hammer, that kind of thing. There's other flails. Same thing, a horseman's or a footman's flail. Same basic concept. Perhaps his or her father was not wealthy and therefore could not afford a sword at all. His or her training would be centered around spears, staves, clubs, bows, slings, maybe your odd axe, that kind of thing. So it depends on the background of your character. A character, it doesn't matter what character you're making up for whose game or whatever game it is, a character with no flaws has no character. Also, a cookie cutter character, as generic as they come, is no fun to run. And the entire purpose of the game is to have fun. So whatever choices you make, try to vary it a little bit. Because if all you run is the same thing time after time after time, you're missing out on the whole other gamut of things. You know what I'm saying? You folks have a good day. God bless one and all.